Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Kansas City, Kansas Public Library, main library, and we have a program, Budgeting with Mint.com. Emerson Hartzler, a pro bono financial advisor, will teach us how to maintain a budget using Mint.com. Mr. Hartzler, take the
Thank you,
lead.
Lena. I appreciate it. Just by way of background, I had 44 years in industry as a business executive and then retired in 2007. The longest time I was ever able to hold a steady job was 16 years. So my goal when I retired in 2007 was to spend at least that much time or more being a financial advisor. So in August, I'll pass my 15th year. So I'm pretty close to doing that. So I decided in my retirement years that I'd done a lot of corporate finance things, but I wanted to do something more personal. I did want to retire, work part-time, tried to put together a business plan, didn't really work out. So I decided, what the heck, I'll just do all of my work on a pro bono basis. So I have for the past almost 15 years now served over 350 families and individuals in personal finance. I've introduced probably about 100 or so people to the Mint.com program. I maintain a list of about 47 clients now I work with on a monthly basis. They're all using Mint.com. And I've done all that work on a pro bono basis, which has really been fun. People say, well, that's not a very good business plan. You're getting no revenue. But I think the rewards are immeasurable, actually. So that's who I am. That's where I've come from. And with that, I'd like to share the screen and talk a little bit about what I did in the first years. So that 8 years, my first 8 years, starting in 2007, I was able to work with a group of certified financial planners, CFPs, who do this for a living, obviously, and try to work out and do their pro bono work. People would come into them, unless you have some substantial assets to manage, these guys really don't have a business plan for you. So I said, well, you do a great service, but you're only doing it for about 5% of the population that have, wealth, significant wealth. What do you do about the others? And they said, well, not much. So I said, well, let me have those. So people kind of came out of the woodwork, so to speak, and thus the 350 people I've been able to work with since that time. So I would ask them, well, what do you really teach? What's the CFP thing all about? How do people become financially successful? And they said, it's really pretty simple. So I want to share the screen here. This is out of a presentation I've made a number of times in other venues. And it talks about the planning principles of financial success. What do you have to do? And there's really only 5 things that they teach people to do. It's all very, very simple. It is not simple, doesn't mean it's easy, but it is simple. And you can do a whole seminar on this. We're not going to do that. We're going to spend all the time on Mint. But basically, the principles are these. You spend less than you make. Now, that sounds intuitive. It sounds pretty simple, but it is possible in our society with credit cards and other means of debt to spend a lot more than you make and do it for a long period of time. It always ends badly, but people do it, and I've seen it, and it's pretty sad. Avoid debt. It's hard to buy a house without borrowing money. Some people will do it, most people don't. But getting back out of debt and really buying a home is the only real reason I would ever give for having any kind of debt, because it's usually debt on an appreciating asset. Your home is going to grow in value if you stay there long enough. Other things that you buy depreciate. It makes no sense to me to borrow any money to buy a depreciating asset. So that. Thirdly, build liquidity. This is all about savings. Put some money away. If you spend less than you make, you've got some money to build liquidity and have some assets that you can invest. Setting long-term financial goals. This is where your CFP comes in. They're going to look at the rest of your life and say, where do you want to get? How soon do you want to get there? How much money do you have to save to do that, et cetera. And then the 5th one is kind of counterintuitive, but give generously and systematically. I think you can always find someone who's worse off than you, or some cause that you believe in very, very well, or very passionately. And the whole generosity of giving just helps you to put things in perspective, and it's an antidote to greed. And then, so these 5 things, if you will do it all the time, and here's the problem, you have to be consistent. And you asked me, okay, well, I'd like to do this. What's the most difficult part? And actually, I've come to believe that it's point number 1, spending less than you make. How do you control that? How do you actually make that happen? And you just have to manage money week to week, month to month, and you have to just do it all the time. You want to know where your money is coming from, where it's going, and be intentional about that. And of course, it gets down to the budgeting part and reporting, which before Mint.com was a hassle. And I'm a financial guy, and I will admit it was difficult. But now with Mint, it's easy, and that's why I'm so excited about the Mint program. So before we get into Mint, I want to do a little role play. And you asked the question, well, why aren't people doing it? Why is this so important? And so here's the role play. Don't worry, I'm going to play all the roles until the end myself. So let's imagine that you are the owner of a small chain of restaurants in the Kansas City area. Okay, so you own these restaurants. You've hired me to be your chief financial officer, and I was qualified to do that during my career. So that's the role play. So you come into my office and say, it's been a tough year so far. Inflation, we got all these problems, but are we on budget to make our plan this year? So you're asking me, okay, you're the CFO, are we on budget? And I respond and say, well, we were working on our budget really hard. We had some numbers together. Then we got inflation and all of our costs, and it's been we haven't finished putting the budget together. So you would then, after probably a long pause, say, well, okay, how are we actually doing? What are our actual results? Not a budget, but what are our actual results? I'm especially concerned about the Lee's Summit operation, because it was kind of shaky. It said, well, and so I say, well, I haven't really kept that level of detail so far this year because of all the other things that are going on, this inflation problem, yada, yada. And you, with another long pause, would say, well, okay, we don't know data on the Lee Summit. How about the overall company? Are we making a profit? Are we taking in more money than we're spending? And I say, well, I don't know, but we did have to borrow against our line of credit lately to pay for things. So that probably doesn't bode well. So then now here you get to participate. What would you, as the owner of the company, do at this point in time? What would you say? Well, if you're still awake and fogging a mirror, the first 2 words out of your mouth should be, you're fired. No one would countenance a CFO who had those kind of answers. So most people would agree that a business that doesn't budget and account for its income and expenses is doomed. But the same people will say, well, I don't really have a business managed, so I don't need to do that. Well, I would say, yes, you do have a business to manage. It is your personal family, your finances. Now, most of you probably aren't going to be able to afford to hire a CFO. And of course, you hired one like me, you wouldn't be happy with them. And so you're in charge. And I think until recently, implementing that kind of personal financial budgeting and accounting was difficult. For many years, I used a spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet, and a checkbook register, and posted things, and it was a problem. Then about 11 years ago, I had some others discovered a miracle, and it's called Mint.com. And so Mint does virtually all of this tedious work for you. It allows you to manage your finances and know the types of things the restaurant owner was so desperately wanting to know in this role play. So that's our task today, is showing you how that Mint.com program actually works. So I'm going to get out of that. And here is the login screen for my account. And again, the caveat here is that this is the only one I can show you. All of my client accounts obviously are personal and confidential. And so you have to understand, I'm a financial nerd. This is more complex than typically my clients will get into, but I'll talk you through, and I think it'll be interesting to see how this actually works. So first of all, this is the screen that logs into my Mint account. And Mint is a product of the Intuit company. They have Mint, they have QuickBooks, they have TurboTax. You may be familiar with some of these programs. In fact, a lot of people use the TurboTax program. But Intuit's a big company. They support this Mint very well. They bought it about 15 years ago from a startup company. But it is what's called an aggregation software. I'll show you how that works. So it's supported by a big company. It is free to the user. And there are a lot of these kind of internet programs available. You'll see it's supported by pop-up ads. You'll see that sort of thing. But when you set up your Intuit Mint account, you'll have an ID like your bank requires, and you'll have a password, very similar to any financial institution. And you need a secure password. Now, the first question that I get from people is to say, well, how safe is Mint? How secure is Mint? And I will say that basically it's as secure as your bank account. If you have online banking, which most people do, you have an ID and a password to get in, you can see your accounts and so forth. And Mint follows the same kind of security measures as your bank. So how safe is it? Well, it's not. Over the past couple of decades, my bank account has been hacked 3 times that I can remember. So the first thing I would recommend, and do recommend to all my clients, is that you have identity theft protection. There are a couple of companies that I would recommend. Zander Insurance, Zander Insurance, is a company that sells a nice program. LifeLock has a pretty robust program, but you can get on the internet, Zander Insurance, LifeLock. I think these cost $8 or $9 or $10 a month. They're well worth it because you can insure against that. And what most people don't realize that if you are hacked, technically, unless the bank can prove you did it, it's their responsibility. You put your money into a bank, they're promising to safe keep that money. And if your account gets hacked, it's the bank that's being hacked, not you. And so it is their responsibility to put the money back. I bank with Commerce Bank, as you'll see here in Kansas City. Every time I've been hacked, they've been very good about researching it, putting the money back in a day or 2 later. But it is a hassle, and you can have, it's a mess. So I would recommend you use a very strong password, and of course, buy this some sort of individual protection. So I go ahead and put in my password, which is in my computer here, and continue. And now I am going into mint.com. So this is my account. And when you log on, it usually goes to the overview section. And you can see there are a number of things: transactions, bills, et cetera, et cetera. 3 of these topics I use. I use the overview, the transactions, and the budgets with my clients. There's lots of other things in here. I think it's mostly fluff. And you'll see all kinds of pop-up ads. You can click on these, and there's all kinds, and that's how they pay for this site. So what Intuit does, it goes out to companies and say, look, we have 20 million people signed on to mint.com. And I don't doubt that they do. In my experience, most of the people haven't set it up right. They don't use it correctly, and they quit using it after a short period of time, which is really, really too bad. And in the end, I'll make a pitch. I do this work pro bono. You really need to have somebody help you set this thing up. What I tell people is the good news is mint.com is a very, very powerful program. It can give you incredible information. Bad news is Mint.com is a very powerful program, and there's lots of ways to get off track. So if you get it set up right and learn how to use it at the start, I have a little 4-page instruction set. These kind of programs, they don't come with that. Their help desk is okay, but it's not great. They're in business to sell advertising, and they do a good job, but their support group is not great, in my opinion. So get it set up right, get trained in it initially. I can help you do that. But it is supported by ads. You just need to understand that. So when you log on and look at the overview section, it tells you, and again, this is 7 hours old when I logged in the last time, it tells you exactly what your balances are in all of your accounts. Now, in the 350 families I work with, almost universally, I found people make their financial systems too complex. You'll see here, I have 2 checking accounts. That's a long story. This is the one I use most of the time. This is the one my wife uses, and we have a savings account. I have 1 credit card, which I wish I didn't have. I think credit cards are evil, but after 20 years of not having a credit card and not needing one, quite frankly, I use a debit card. I've used it all over the world. The travel, it's just not necessary. But the rental car companies now are all refusing to use debit cards. They want a credit card. So I have a credit card that I use for my vacations to rent a car and other things. And so I wish I didn't have it, but it does add a little complexity. So anyway, I have 4 accounts. I had 1 client with 42. And believe it or not, Mint could smash all that together into 1 transaction register, but it was not ideal. We had to simplify that. But most people have more accounts that they need, and I would encourage you, Mint does your accounting. People need one checking account and 1 savings account and a debit card, and call it good. And it just simplifies your life. So that's my first point. Occasionally, Mint, when you first set up your account, it will go through a process of linking all your bank accounts into Mint. And that's the hardest part of getting started. And that's why you need some help to start off. Once you get them linked up, it's amazing what it does. Occasionally, it will become unlinked. For example, if your bank says now it's time to change your password to getting into your bank account at Commerce or wherever, and you change it, you will have loaded the password to that account into Mint, so it can go get that information. And of course, it will have the wrong password. And so you'll get a little red dot and a message that says, we haven't been connected here to Mint for some time. And so you can go up to settings where a lot of information is, and they'll take you through the process of loading new passwords. Pretty simple. So that's the first thing I do to make sure I know what the balances are and make sure that is connecting and not disconnected. So that's interesting. Now, moving on to transactions. And here you'll see a display of all those same accounts on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the transaction register. So now total cash of $12,000, total debt of $447. That's coming right off your overview screen, those same numbers. But now I have 9 accounts. Those of you saw before, plus some investment accounts at Fidelity. It's taking all of those accounts and up to date, putting all of that together into 1 transaction register. Every transaction that goes through, dollars coming in, those are the green numbers, dollars going out, the black numbers. Every transaction is accumulated here in one transaction register. Like the guy who had 42 accounts, all of that got into 1 register, and it's by date. Now starts at today's date, yesterday's date actually, and going back in history. My account has been active since, like press on that, it goes the other way, since 12/28/2011. Every transaction in my financial life is in Mint for a little over 10 years now. So normally this comes up with today's date working backwards. Then just to save real estate, on the screen, I've got 100 transactions in each one of these screens. You can do 25, 50 or whatever. Every transaction has a line and a description, which is very brief. Now you can add or change that. That's a coffee shop. I can go back and delete that and so just say coffee shop. And it, if I could spell, there you go. And you can change it, this description at will. Mint, in its infinite wisdom, will pick up some things of that electronic description, and it will put it into one of their budget categories, not necessarily one of yours, but we'll talk about that later. And then an amount. So on April 12th, this transaction from Revo Coffee Shop came through, $5.20, including a generous tip, I'm sure. Probably not in my case. And Mint says that's a coffee shop. Then if you want to find out more about it, you just click this little edit details, and this is a lot of information. So the blue, it says that it appears on your Commerce Bank, Commerce Basic Checking, that's the one I use, that's the first account. And it's a debit card purchase in Rebel Cup Coffee Shop. That blue lettering is in fact the electronic signature that your bank has picked up. And so if I click on that, it'll take me out to the website of Rebel Cup Coffee Shop. But that's that transaction. Every one of these things is another transaction. Again, green numbers, money coming into your bank accounts. Here's a transfer that's coming in, and the black numbers are dollars going out. Now, and if you look at the details, it'll tell you more. So we'll get back to that later on. Well, that's a lot of data. Again, I've got 10 years of data, but I wouldn't classify that as information. What is information is, and this is the payoff, this is the budget screen. So if you click on budgets, you'll see there are monthly budgets, and it's set up on a calendar basis. Each month has its records, and it defaults to the current month. You can look at this month, you can look at last month, any of the historic months here. You can look at this year to date. It'll display the three and a half months we have already and data. You can display last year. It'll give you January through December totals for the whole year. You can look at it all time, why you would do that. But starting in April, let's just look at the month of April. This is a very interesting display of data. I have, again, too many, but I've got 5 categories of income and a whole bunch of categories of expenses. And on the right-hand side, you'll see my budget, $70 for auto insurance, $90 for gas. On the left-hand side of this, you'll see a number, $52. That's the accumulated amount that I've spent so far in April. Happens to be 1 tank of gas, unfortunately, because gas has gone up, as you know. Let's look at something more interesting. Let's look at groceries. So I have a budget of $750 a month for groceries, and I've spent $301 against that. And Mint gives me a nice little thermometer, the green, that says I'm under budget and I'm less than half of the month. So you had a visual display. And when I go to my monthly budget to look at that, which I recommend people do once a week for 5 minutes or less. I do it every day because I'm in the business, but I recommend to my clients, just look at it once a week. It'll take you 5 minutes or less to analyze it on a weekly basis, make any changes you need to make. And we'll talk about that later. So I look at my groceries. I spent $301. I say, well, and I get a nice little bar that says, well, I'm kind of on budget because it's the 13th of the month, a little less than halfway through. That looks good. I've already overspent my monthly budget in a couple of instances, and that gives me a red bar. So I look for red bars and say, oops, is there anything I can do to stop spending in that area because I'm already over budget. Most of these categories are in the green. So I say, well, okay, now $301 is the accumulated spending. Where have I spent that? And if I go over here and rest on this little thing here. It says view transactions for groceries. So this is really cool. If I click on that, it takes me back to the transaction register, but instead of 10 years of data, it gives me only April and only groceries. So I can see I spent $300. Here's where I spent it: Hy-Vee, Target, Costco, Hy-Vee, so forth. So it's pretty cool. Back to budgets, takes me back to April, and I can look at something else. Let's look at, that's what I really wanted to look at. Can't remember which it was. Here's outpatient other, physician group, CVS, and so forth. So it's 145 bucks. So you can see where you're spending it transaction by transaction. Now I've got, again, 25 categories or more of expenses. Most people have much less than that. And in each case, Mint has selected, either by rules that I've set or just their own internal logic, which one of the categories that I have selected applies. But here is a section of everything else. And these are cases where Mint has selected a category, and it's not one that I use. If you look under food and dining, these are all alphabetic. I've got groceries and restaurants, but those are the only two categories I'm using in the food and dining category. So that falls down here and it says we haven't found a place for it. So in maintaining your Mint account, really what you have to do here is just get rid of this thing and the everything else. So if I click on that, again, it takes me back to the transaction register. And here's a debit card. Here's our old friend, the Revel Cup deal. Well, it's in its infinite wisdom, Mint has selected coffee shops. So if I pull down this menu, here's the standard Mint menu, and it's alphabetic order: auto and transport, financial, food and dining, etc. And within each one of these categories, there are subcategories. So you could have 1,000 categories here. You could actually add categories to it. And again, simpler is better. Most of the time we have 3 or 4 income categories and maybe 10 to 15 expense categories. That's typical. I have selected under food and dining to budget for groceries and budget for restaurants, because I do want to keep track of how much I go out to eat. It's more expensive than eating at home. So in this case, Revo Coffee Shop would be classified as an eating out. So I want to put that into restaurants. Now here's the training part. So now I can say, well, I've changed it, and it gives me a chance to set a rule. And so if I click here, it's always going to look at this electronic signature. Next time I go to that restaurant, it's going to put it into restaurants rather than in coffee shops. So now I've set a rule, and here I can manage the rules, and you can see I have a lot of rules for 11 years. But that's how you gradually train Mint to put things into the right category, and then it becomes automatic. So I just click I'm done, and now I've got a rule that says next time I go to this coffee shop, which I will next week probably, it'll fall in the right category. Back to April. Now here's another one. Again, Five Guys. Here, Commerce Interest. My wife went there. That's her checking account, and she purchased some food from fast. Well, it's fast food, but I don't use that category. I just use restaurants. And so I'm going to set a rule that says next time we go to Five Guys, it's going to fall into restaurants. So I'm done with that. I go back to the budgets. And now I have miscellaneous expenses. I don't know what that is. I made this one up. I changed the thing on purpose. So this is my use of my one credit card. I've reserved a rental car for later this month to take a little trip, and they've already charged me. I don't use the miscellaneous expenses. That would be travel in my budget. So I click on travel, and I can then set a rule next time I rent from Hertz, it's going to come out on travel. Now, the last thing here that you see is a transfer section. And this is a little tricky. One of the things you need to have somebody help you set this up. If you go back to the overview section, when money comes into any of these accounts from the outside world, it creates a transaction in your bank account. And Mint's going to look at that. It's going to say, oh, that's income. It's incoming. And it's going to go to the transaction register and assign it a green number. Okay, so this is money coming into my account from my bank, 2 cents for interest, not make a lot of money on interest. Then if money disappears from any one of these accounts, I charge the deal for Hertz, then that 293 bucks disappears from this account and it appears on the transaction register. There it is, $293. It's a black number. If money then moves from one of my accounts, let's say I pay off the credit card account by taking money out of my checking account. So there's a black number of money moving out of this account, a green number, money moving into this account. And that's a transfer. And it shouldn't be in your monthly budget because it's not income, it's not expense. It's just moving money from one to the other. I move money from my checking account into my savings or vice versa. I should get two transactions. So let's look and see what really happened. And there were several transfers actually. This is a really good example. $600 came out of my basic checking account on April 1st, and $600 went into the Commerce Interest checking account. That's my wife's account. So we do a little balancing every month, moving money from my account to hers so that she's got enough money to pay her parts of the budget. And likewise, I have enough left. But this is kind of an odd deal. This was actually some income that I got, and got a little confused to put it in the transfer column. I happen to know that's income, other income, long story. So I make that change. Okay, now I go back to April, other income. I just put it in there. There it is, plus the interest payment of 2 cents we talked about earlier. And now I'm righteous because that is, in fact, income, $251. Transfers disappear. So now I'm clean for the month, and I can see by category how much money I've actually spent against the budget. And then here are my totals. So far, most of my income comes later in the month. So my total income is almost 1,200 bucks. I've spent $1,900 so far. And if I go back to look at any other prior month, it tells me what my income was, what my spending was, what the budget was, gives me bars. I can look at this year so far. It'll pick up everything from January 1st. So I know my own budget, gives me green bars, red bars, so forth. So I can monitor every one of these accounts for the year. I want to know what it was last year. I can have that. So again, the overview gives you your balances, tells you whether you're connected. All this is fine. It amalgamates all that in one transaction register where everything in your financial life is recorded. And then in your budget screen, it pulls all of that into one of your budget categories. And again, I've got more than you would normally want, but it allows you to set up budgets for anything in these categories. You can have subcategories, you can add subcategories if you want. So simpler is better, but these are the ones that I've chosen. So what I do with my clients is help them go through their expenses and look at what categories would be meaningful for them. Again, less is more, and then work through several months of just saying, how do you maintain that thing? How do you make sure that the Rebel cup coffee always gets in the restaurants if that's what you're using, so forth. And so this becomes kind of semi-automatic. It just happens. These things come in, they flow into the budget screen. You can look at that. I would recommend on a weekly basis. And at the end of each month, you'll have a total record of how much income you had from where every year. You can do that year to date, or you can look at last year's and compare how that went out. So that's kind of the end of the instruction. Again, I have like a 4-page instruction manual I'd be glad to send out. But my real pitch is you've seen these ads on TV of these people driving cars very fast on closed circuit. They say, don't try this yourself. There's just enough barbed wire in this, especially when you're setting out to set up your account, that you need some help. I'd be happy to do this on a pro bono basis. We can do it via Zoom call where I share the screen like we're doing now. You can come into my office. There's never a charge to my clients, and I will be doing this as long as I possibly can. Again, my goal is 17 years. I'm almost 15 into it, so we'll see. So with that, Elena, do you have people in the chat room with questions? People want to open the mics and go for it. I'll leave this up and we can talk through anything you want to review here.
I don't see anything in the chat, so I'm encouraged you all to ask questions if you have any, and this is a great opportunity to ask questions. Anybody? You can unmute yourselves and ask.
No such thing as a dumb question. Hopefully the answers will be the same.
Okay, I will ask a question. I will start. So usually when anybody mentions the word budget, you think how much money was spent on groceries, how much money was spent on gas, other expenses like electricity, car expenses. I see only groceries here. I don't see lots of other categories. Groceries, restaurants, charity, but like utilities.
So under utilities, I have 3 categories. And the way this is set up, and this is what I asked clients, if you knew the information of how much you're spending, let's go back to this year. If you knew how much you were spending, could you do anything about it? And in my case, I live in a retirement community where most of the utilities are covered already by the plan. But I do have an internet service that I pay for, and I have a mobile phone that I pay for, okay? So I want to keep track of those, because if this bill gets to be too high, then I can change plans, I could change carriers, I could, I could do something about it. So normally you'll have an internet connection, you'll have a mobile phone connection, and you'll have other utilities in a category. Some people want to break out gas versus electricity, and I say, look, what can you do about it? It's a utility. You can't change and go to another power company unless you move, okay? So normally the 3 categories, internet, mobile phone, and just utilities are normal. Entertainment, there's lots of different types of entertainment. You could catalog. For most people, I'd say entertainment is entertainment. And groceries and restaurants, I have people that just have food and dining, which is the major category. Don't break it out because they don't use restaurants much. I've got charity versus gifts, other gifts. You could have just gifts and donations. So it's very individual. Now, some of these categories, let's see. Rent would be a good example. I mean, you're going to pay the rent of your mortgage. I mean, it's going to be the same if you have a car payment, which I don't, it's going to be the same. So once you set up those kinds of systems, it's just going to be the same. A lot of people are on level payment plans for utilities. So some of these categories are pretty well fixed in your budget, and that's what you're going to spend. Others are very much flexible and discretionary. For instance, going out to eat. I mean, I can go out to eat, or I can go to the grocery store. I can tell you it's always more expensive to go out to eat than buy your own food. Entertainment, obviously you could shut that completely down. Gift giving, shopping, my wife has been, I gotta look at this. I mean, so there are lots of categories where you see, well, I'm over for this month. I can not spend any more money this month. I can wait until next month when the budget resets for another month. And so you have kind of a braking system on a lot of these categories where you have discretion. You can say, well, if I'm looking, I look for red bars. And then the next question is, if I'm already in the red, can I stop spending until next month? And in many cases I can. And that's, I'm not going to go shopping until, next month rolls around and I have some more money in the budget. So that's the way on a weekly basis you can use this thing. It can be very quick. It's very easy to get rid of this everything else section of a given month. If you're looking at it on a timely basis, you'll remember what that was. I can remember what Revel Coffee Shop was. I remember the Hertz thing. So it's very easy to make the changes at that point in time. And once you get used to the categories that you're using when you pull down that menu, you don't have to worry about, which ones. I know which ones I'm using. I've used it for a long time. So it's a very effective tool, even during the month, to say, okay, if I'm over budget or I'm close to my budget, can I shut it down? Groceries, well, if I need food, I need food, but maybe I look in the cupboard or I use leftovers or whatever and delay going out even to buy groceries until next week, until the next month budget rolls around. So, and again, if you have a problem with any one month, which will happen, my next deal is I go to look at this year and say, am I having the same problem this year? So that's a real indication that things are going awry. And most of my this year so far have been in the green, so it's looking fairly well.
Well, we started getting some questions.
Good.
How safe is putting your information out there?
Well, again, we talked about that at the start of the presentation. I would recommend someone like LifeLock or Xander Insurance to buy identity theft protection, because although Mint tries very hard, as you can imagine, to keep all this confidential and safe, but they use the same systems as the bank, and I've been hacked, and if you haven't been hacked already, you probably will. So buying that identity theft protection is good. The other suggestion I make is that most of the hacking will take place based on transactions. So I encourage people not to keep any more money in their checking account than they need to have there. Move it off into a savings or another bank even, because you want to keep the account where the transactions take place to a minimum balance, so that you can't hack too much out of that. So I don't want $30,000 sitting in my checking account, because that would be very painful. So you just need to take precautions. Identity theft protection, keeping a minimum amount of your checking where most of the transactions take place, will help you in not being hacked. Again, credit cards are a little less of a hassle with the hacking, because they can charge it, but then you can just not pay it. With debit cards, the money comes out of your account immediately. So identity theft protection and insuring against it through that, and not keeping a lot of money in your checking account, because you can expect to get hacked. It's just a matter of life. Mint tries their hardest to make sure that doesn't happen. If I were a hacker, I'd go directly into your checking account. This just has information. I can't really get anything out of Mint. But if I could hack through Mint to my checking account, yes. I think it's harder to do than just going directly to the account, but I'm not here saying it's perfectly safe. Everybody, doesn't have to worry. Again, identity theft protection.
Another question. I noticed one of the bars on the budget tab was yellow. What does yellow mean?
Well, you're right on budget. I don't know where you got that. Yeah, here. So I've budgeted $100 per month. I'm exactly at $100. It'll come up with a yellow or gold deal. So it's green if you're under, red if you're over, yellow if you're right on. Good question.
How
again, I'm out of my cash budget for the month. I have an interesting little rule. it's the $10 rule. I go to the ATM and get cash on occasion. And if something out there is $10 or less, I just throw cash at it and throw the receipt away. Otherwise, I use a debit card and I keep the receipt. I post it in their check register. It hits in the mint, and I've got to get it into one of these categories. So this is, less than 1% of my budget every month that I don't control. It's just cash. So that's what I'd recommend. Everything else, use a debit card. Get that transaction is going to find its way someplace. Some people still write checks. And when you write a check, I don't have any outstanding here, but all I try not to write. Here's a check. Okay, so check 2692. I had to go in and categorize that because it doesn't go through the process. All Mint knows is that was a check number 2692 in my Commerce Basic account that cleared on April 5th for $221. So I'm always going to have to go in and code those to the proper expense account. So I don't use checks very much. I use a debit card instead.
How accurate is the estimation of credit scores?
Well, this just allows you to get into the credit score. I think it's a way to do that here. I'm not sure exactly, but this is not a credit scoring system. It just will help you access the three credit agencies. So it doesn't really impact your credit score at all.
If interested in signing up for assistance with setting up an account via Zoom or in person, how do we sign up?
Okay, so what did I do? There it is. You just give me an email and I'll leave that on the screen for a while, and I'll respond to you with correspondence through email. I don't put you in any kind of a list, and no danger of that. But we can set up a Zoom call or a face-to-face meeting. I will say what you will need to do, and that's very important. Mint is very good at collecting everything from all the accounts you put into it. When I meet with clients for the first time, I'll often say, okay, well, you have to have the ID and the password for your bank so that we can load that into Mint, so that Mint then can go automatically into your account and pull out that information. And they'll bring their accounts in, but then they'll forget about 2 or 3 credit cards they had, or their Venmo account, or whatever. And so to use Mint, you have to make sure that every account that you have, ID and password gets loaded in here. Thus, the sermon on simplification. I wish I didn't have to have a credit card. I can't see any reason why you would complicate your life by having more than one credit card. I mean, borrowing money is not a way to prosperity. I'm sorry. The rewards you get are, it's just a bad system. But simpler is better. But I just encourage people to close accounts they're not using. But every account that you're going to be using to receive money or to spend money has to be in Mint. Otherwise, you won't get everything that flows through. So the whole purpose of this is to track every dollar that comes in, every dollar that goes out, and you have got to get every account into Mint. And it can handle 42 accounts. I mean, it's crazy, but it will do that. I absolutely would not recommend it, but that's what we have to do to start with. We have to get every account in here, so it's tracking everything coming in and going out.
Do you have to put credit card accounts there even if they have zero balance and they're not being used?
If you're not going to use them, no. But then if you're going to use them in an emergency, yes, because then you're going to miss the transaction, and it's not going to show up like it should.
How do you recommend account for unexpected expenses? If is there a way to track savings and such?
Well, so again, once you get this set up and you get everything in here, you're gonna capture everything, whether it's expected or not expected. And one of the nice things about setting up a system like this, it is ongoing. I usually when you first set up your account, Mint is going to go back for about 2.5 months and gather up transactions, and then it's going to quit because you're never going to be able to put those transactions in the right category if it's 3 years ago. I mean, impossible. Then going forward, it captures everything every day, every month, and so forth. And so after about 3 months, you begin to see the patterns of what normally is happening on a routine basis. And then I encourage people, now we're going to set up a budget, load the budget into mint.com so you have these numbers on the right-hand side and you're tracking. Now, after you've done this for a year, you're going to trap some things that you forgot about or didn't appear in the first 3 months. So your budget for the second year is going to be a lot better than the one you start with. Okay. And you can change it from time to time, but that's the beauty of this. You will capture everything. And so something comes up that's unexpected, something that comes up you pay twice a year, you forgot about it, it's going to be captured here. And then when you go, you kept refining your budget over and over again, year after year, you'll get really, really good at this. And Murphy's Law, things will always happen. But that's, going back to this presentation, if you're tracking stuff, every what did I say? Yeah, I mean, if you're doing this all the time, you set up a budget, you're trying to avoid debt, you're trying to build liquidity, build savings, and so forth. Murphy's Law will happen, and there will be times when you'll have to withdraw that money back out. But if you've done it, at least you'll have some savings to draw upon. So that's the whole idea. You budget, you try to get money, spend less than you earn on a routine basis, keep putting money into your savings and investments. And then if you have to draw upon your savings, you've got it, as opposed to just living paycheck to paycheck.
Explain the investment section of the program.
It just tracks your investments. I initially don't recommend that people put their investments into Mint. I have mine in there just because it's more convenient to look at it there. But it will just track your investment balances. At any one day, you can go in there and see exactly what the balances are in each of your. So you'll have investment balances as well as this. And it's just a convenient way of looking at it. In fact, I've got one couple that I introduced to the Mint. They don't use the budgets at all. They just use this to track, have in one place all their investment balances. So it doesn't really help you manage it. It shows you the investment balance. The main virtue of this is just to track your monthly budget, which has been heretofore a very, very difficult proposition. I get questions after I met with clients 2 or 3 times, say, well, where do I put in this data? I say, you can put transactions into Mint. I don't want you to, because Mint is just super good at capturing every transaction that takes place in your life. So it's already there. It's in your bank account, and it's just pulling it out and displaying it in a way that you can actually get information and manage things by. So there's no work. You don't put anything in. It's already there.
So Mint only captures transactions in your checking account mostly. What if you use credit cards, and will they take any account into consideration and
I could have
put different categories for any
I could
account,
have
right?
I could have, God forbid, 10 credit cards, if I list them all in here and link them all in, every transaction that I use for any of those cards comes into your transaction register. So it's what they call an accumulation software. It accumulates transactions for any account that's listed in here.
Yeah, and I can also chime in. My name's Amy. I work for Catholic Charities, but I use Mint and I have savings accounts and it tracks them for me. And I also, if you look up towards the top, all of those categories that we're looking at, overview, transactions, goals, etc. I actually do have like the goals ones set up and it allows you to select certain accounts. So for example, I set a goal for I'm saving up because I know I'm going to need a new car eventually. And I have one particular savings account that every time money is put in there, because I have direct deposit, it's just taken out of my check. Every time money's put into that particular account, it counts it as like, oh, you're saving towards your new car.
Cool.
So it
Yeah,
does track those kinds of things too, which is really cool.
I don't have any goals in mind, but yeah, I have a lot of clients to do. That's great. And it's kind of it's a pretty robust thing. Allows you to choose what you're going to buy and that sort of thing, and tell you how much you need. Yeah, for my clients that are doing budgeting, I use the overview transactions and budgets, but a lot of other people will do lots of other fun things with it. But again, you got your savings account listed here like I do, and money comes in, it'll show that transaction and show your balance.
Thank you. Very interesting. Thank you very much. Well, does anybody else have any questions?
Yes, is there a way to insert into the program how to calculate for the adjustments for inflation, especially since they keep going up so daggone much?
Well, not automatically, but again, let's take an example. Groceries. So far, I'm actually below my grocery budget year to date. But if this thing gets out of whack, I'm going to know about it pretty quickly. And let's say, I've got a family I've got to feed and so forth, and just reality hits me, and grocery budget is higher than it's been. So I've got to make an adjustment. So let's say I go in here and I can only change my budget in the current month. Right, let's go back here and say groceries, I've got $7.50. So I'm saying, well, that's not reality. I'm going to have to pay $8.50. So I can go over here where it says edit details and I can change my budget. I'm going to make it $8.50. Now, problem is, now I've got income of $12,864, spending of $12,964. I'm $100 under budget. I can't spend 100 more than I make. So what can I do? Now it forces me to go in and say, all right, I'm going to have to get some other income, or I'm going to have to cut some other expense down. So here's my favorite. So I'm saying, okay, well, now that's not enough. Let's look at my travel account. Let's say, okay, I've scheduled $400 a month for traveling. I could cut that. So let's say I go 400 for travel. Maybe I can cut that to 300. I'm still okay so far. Now my budget is balanced again. So it allows you to do those kind of things. As you discover things aren't going well in one category, you can either have a strategy for reducing expenses in that category. That's what I help clients to do, look at those. Or you can say, well, that's reality. I've got to change that budget. It's got to be $8.50 rather than $7.50. Well, what do? I just can't accept the $100. I mean, that's living in la la land. So we got to figure out how to make $100 more a month, or I've got to find a category like my travel where I can cut it down by $100. Does that make sense? back to zero. Good question, though. Doesn't automatically do it, but it does highlight where you need to do it.
Very interesting. Any more questions, anybody?
Any books you would recommend for those of us who are willing to try it on our own?
No, the problem with Mint.com and other similar products is that, you know, they're internet based. I'm an old school guy. I like to have a manual. If you want to give me an email, I'll send you in the 4-page instruction manual that I have. I'd be happy to do that. But Mint doesn't have anything like that. Again, I'm kind of cynical about their business plan. I think their main objective is to sell advertising and make money, rather than you know, do things for the people who are actually using the product. But that's probably too cynical. I think they work really hard at doing the best thing they can. But I'll be happy to send that to you if you just give me an email. I don't know of any other book or any other instruction manual for it, but the 4-page thing is fairly detailed, so it will definitely help you.
Okay, here's information, contact information from Mr. Hartzler. If anybody needs it, please write it down. Okay,
I think at this point, I'll stop sharing my screen and let you take over. Lynn. Thank you.
everybody, thank you very much for participating in this wonderful webinar. And we will record it and post it on our programming blog within a day or two. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was very, very
Yeah,
helpful.
thank you for having this for us.